somehow this is going to be a reality, that it's the kind of reality principle of criticism, and not tying it to a history of projects that make it look, you know, certainly legitimate within the tradition and of the discipline. And actually one of the projects from the Neil Denari workshop, which I think in a certain way envisions another version of that de-accessioning or turning low-density parts into urban farming and densifying along the lake. So, you know, I think that we're at this moment of the, you know, the kind of the problem with the reality principle of architecture and criticism, the conditions of the idis. And I want to show two images here. I'll show you both of them right now. It's a kind of comparison I steal in a way from Stan Allen. And I typically use this, this is from Waking Life, Linkletter's film, and this is from Monsters, Inc., the Pixar film that you're all familiar with. Stan says that there's two ways, Stan uses it, and I think it's an interesting way. There's two ways to think about technology. There's the way of imagining a fantasy and then using technology to realize it, which is to say, I imagine a green monster, and then through great effort and expense, I'm going to show how the green monster's hair actually blows in the wind. The idea that you take a fantasy and you domesticate it by virtue of our reality of gravity and wind and kind of give verisimilitude to this artifactual projection. He says that the other way, which is highly expensive, it's what I would call in McLuhan's terms a hot use of the technology. Let's say a cool use of the technology would be something like Linkletter's Waking Life, which starts with videos of real actors and then hand paints them and hand colors them across the cells, a very low-tech process that in fact starts with reality but liberates what you could say the fantasy or plasticity of reality from that material. And I would say it also has the kind of, in this case, the stark abstraction of individuality or abstraction of the city that I would say is one version of cartooning. So I think the Linkletter film technique, the cool use of the media, fits in with the low definition aspects of the cartoon. But I think there's another way to think about these two images, which is less judgmental, which is that Arthur Drexler has said that the job of technology is to make the fantasy a reality, or to make the dream a reality. This is Rainer Banham quoting Drexler. And so in a sense that you could say that that's what this is, that if technology's job for design is how do you take fantasy and realize it, figure it out, you know, I'm fine to stipulate that definition. I guess as a corollary then I might use this as to say the job of theory, which is to say that the job of theory is to start with reality and demonstrate its artifactual quality or its plasticity or its susceptibility to be something other than what it seems to be. So I think that, you know, together those two things aid a certain model of disciplinary design, though I think that they're both at risk in a way today. And so in consulting the Magic 8-Ball for the last time, you know, I decided to ask it, what will we be done with in the next year? What future can we look forward to? What things do we not have to worry about in the future or say? So these were the top 5 that the 8-Ball came up with. Justifies any project everywhere. Even though in architecture there was such a thing as, yes, infrastructuralism in the early to mid-90s with Stan Allen and Jesse Reiser quoting the term infrastructuralism. So in fact, in architecture schools, the issue of infrastructure as a project has been, as a disciplinary project, let's say, has long legs. But now that we have a new kind of political model and a version of ambulance chasing, now everybody's favorite thing is infrastructure because it's the new reality principle. And at this point, I think it's not left the field. In other words, I think this will be a cliche that we can soon move on from. So this was just the earlier part, which is to say back to the poly-phi of plastic collectives. I'm not going to go into the audience issue. Maybe just a last summary on the issue of articulation and notation. You know, I meant to say when we were looking at the idis also that that the problem with the bureaucratic way of speaking with the idis is you know, they always, is that it's basically the world of policy. And so while honesty, or maybe what you might say today, earnestness, or what Dave Hickey calls unction or unctuousness, honesty or earnestness may be the best policy, but fiction is the best politics. And I think that the difference between the idiom and the ism is a difference between policy and politics. And I don't want to reduce architecture to an issue of policy. I think it's actually has a kind of political imaginary possibility. In any case, as a in one manifestation of this, I suppose, I think that you know, in terms of the science fiction combination, I think that you could say there are 4 ways of how one comes out of the, let's say, the modern problem with ornament or representation or communication. I think there's articulation, there's notation, there's decoration, and there's figuration. And you could put stand-in figures for those things: Frampton articulation, Eisenman notation, Venturi decoration, and Hayek figuration. I think that what I call the digital intricacy crowd is in fact a combination of the Frampton tectonic project and the Eisenman index project. And it's a way to solve the problems that both of those individuals had and to move it into a different terrain. Again, as a way of occupying maybe minor territory, or what I would call, back to the fire robin, making the weaker case the stronger. I think that decoration and figuration, and this will tie to the cartoon project, have been, in a sense, underplayed. And so the issue for me is, in terms of graphic expediency, instead of the micro-articulation of the non-standard, or what they call mass customization, i.e. differentiation, that one could in fact combine Venturi and Hayek as a different trajectory, which I think follows the cartoon project, the big outlines of cartooning, or what I would like to call or patent as custom massification, which is to say how we produce new forms of audience, how we produce artificial communities and collectives, becomes it's not about differentiating. Mass customization is there will be a specific design product for your parametric needs. We will differentiate the standard product to address you as an individual. I think the problem today, the political problem today, is not how do we individualize. We have too damn much of that. The question is how do we produce any credible sense of the collective? And so the idea of fashioning or customizing masses or groups as opposed to individualizing or customizing kind of mass-produced consumer object. You know, I think, no, we won't get into the 2 eggs, but Greg's egg is basically the model of differentiation and mass customization. I think that the Congrès Expo egg is the opposite trajectory, which is to say you'd start with individual differences and you fuse them to produce a new identity. Because the question is, how can groups take new pleasures in images or shapes that they can then become you know, take a new kind of pleasure and identification with. So rather than saying that we're going to take this thing and differentiate it to each of your nudes and each of your sites, I would say it's a little bit of the parametric problem of the Zaha Pavilion. The issue is how do you take differentiated parts and put them together to produce a new singularity or a new image. Hence body without organs. The last 6 slides are really just scatter shot of what that might look like, because I think one is obligated in arguing for a position not to avoid the formal design issues. And so that if the question is, what does political fiction look like? In other words, the reason that the new urbanists, God hate them, but they're very smart because they also produced an image around which audiences and collectives and developers and so on could arrange. And so if you're going to engage that territory, you can't go in with one arm tied behind your back and say it doesn't look like anything. So I think that, you know, in terms of the cartooning project, I think that MVRDV's Hagen Island is one version of that. The kind of, I think if you want to go back and trace the legacy of